Flight Attendant slaps Black Billionaire. 2 minutes later, his ruthless revenge strikes. Marcus Kingston sat in first class, staring out the window as the jet taxied on the runway. His private jet was under maintenance, so for the first time in years, he was flying commercial. To most passengers, he appeared to be just another well-dressed traveler, though some might have recognized him from the business magazines, where his billion-dollar tech empire often made headlines. A self-made black billionaire, Marcus had risen from nothing, and despite his vast wealth, he'd learned that the world often treated people based on perception rather than fact. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. It had been a long day of meetings, and Marcus was looking forward to a quiet flight back to New York. The hum of the plane's engines provided a sense of calm as he relaxed into his seat, thinking about the acquisition deal his company had just finalized. He barely noticed the flight attendant making her rounds until she stopped beside him. "Sir, please put your seatbelt on. We're preparing for takeoff," she said sharply, her voice devoid of the usual first-class politeness. Marcus glanced at her, noticing her stern expression. "Sure," he replied, reaching for the belt. But as he buckled in, the flight attendant's scowl deepened. Her name tag read, *Caroline*. Without a word, she grabbed the belt to tug it tighter, even though it was already secure. Marcus, taken aback by her aggressive handling, remained calm but spoke firmly. "I've got it. Thank you," he said, locking eyes with her. Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't take that tone with me," she snapped. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "You heard me. We don't tolerate rudeness here. I don't care how much money you have." The cabin went silent. Nearby passengers shifted in their seats, watching the interaction unfold with wide eyes. Marcus remained composed, but his patience was wearing thin. "I'm not sure what your problem is, but I suggest you calm down," he said evenly. Caroline scoffed. "You people always think you can talk to us however you want. Well, not on my plane." Before Marcus could respond, she raised her hand and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin, a mix of disbelief and shock rippling through the passengers. Marcus's head snapped to the side, his cheek stinging from the unexpected blow. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The other passengers stared in stunned silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Caroline, chest heaving with fury, seemed momentarily satisfied with herself, as if she had put a misbehaving child in his place. But she had no idea who she had just struck. Marcus slowly turned his head back, his face composed, but his eyes cold. He reached up, touched his cheek, then slowly stood. Caroline's bravado faltered as he rose to his full height, towering over her. "You made a mistake," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. Caroline crossed her arms, trying to maintain her authority. "You need to sit down before I have security remove you from this plane." Marcus's lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You're going to wish you had never laid a hand on me." Without another word, Marcus calmly took his phone from his pocket. The gesture seemed almost too casual for the situation, but he wasn't calling the police or security. No, his revenge would be much more precise and swift. He tapped a few numbers, then brought the phone to his ear. "Michael, it's Marcus," he said calmly. "I need you to ground this plane immediately. No, don't ask questions, just do it." Caroline's face paled as she began to realize what was happening. She opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus cut her off with a cold glance. Within seconds, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are returning to the gate. Please remain seated." Caroline's eyes widened in horror. "What did you just do?" she whispered, stepping back. Marcus remained silent, his gaze locked on her, but she could feel the weight of his power pressing down on her. She had humiliated him, but she had no idea she had just insulted one of the most influential men in the country. Minutes later, the plane rolled back to the gate, and Caroline's face turned a sickly shade of white. Marcus had barely moved, but his phone buzzed again. He glanced down at the screen and nodded before putting it away. The flight attendant supervisor arrived quickly, alerted by the sudden return of the aircraft. "Mr. Kingston," the supervisor said, his voice filled with respect. "We've been informed of the situation. Please accept our deepest apologies. Caroline, step off the plane immediately." Caroline's mouth fell open. "What? No, He was being rude." "Now," the supervisor ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Humiliated and trembling, Caroline gathered her things and walked down the aisle, the eyes of the passengers burning into her. By the time she exited the plane, her career was in free fall. She'd just lost her job and any hope of finding another in the industry. As the door closed behind her, Marcus sat back down, his demeanor as calm as ever. The other passengers watched in awe, some whispering to each other, still unsure of what had just transpired. The captain soon came on the intercom again. "We apologize for the delay, but we will be taking off shortly. Thank you for your understanding." Marcus's phone buzzed one final time. He looked down, seeing a message from his assistant, confirming that the airline CEO had personally fired Caroline and arranged for a formal apology. With one small gesture, Marcus had crushed her career, an act of ruthless precision executed in minutes. But as the plane soared into the clouds, Marcus didn't gloat. He simply looked out the window, his expression thoughtful. For a man who had worked his way from poverty to billionaire status, he had faced far worse than a slap. He could have handled it quietly, but sometimes people needed a reminder. His success wasn't just about money or power, it was about respect. He had built his empire with grit and brilliance, but some people only saw the color of his skin. Caroline's actions were a reminder that even as a billionaire, society often saw him as less. He didn't enjoy bringing someone's career crashing down, but he knew that people like her thrived on unchecked power. If she could treat a wealthy, well-dressed man like him with such disdain, how would she treat those who couldn't fight back? That thought fueled his decision to act swiftly. This was about sending a message, not just to her, but to anyone who thought they could get away with that kind of behavior. As the flight leveled out, Marcus turned his attention to the in-flight service. The new flight attendant approached his seat cautiously, her face apologetic as she placed a fresh cup of coffee on his tray table. "Mr. Kingston," she said softly, "on behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for what happened. If there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, please let us know." Marcus nodded, accepting the gesture without much fanfare. "Thank you. Just doing your job is enough." The attendant gave a nervous smile before hurrying away, leaving Marcus to his thoughts. He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a tablet to review some reports, but the weight of the morning's incident still hung over him. Across the aisle, a fellow passenger, a white businessman in his 50s, leaned in slightly, his voice low but curious. "Excuse me, sir, I couldn't help but notice what happened earlier. That was something." Marcus glanced up, offering a polite smile. "Yeah, it was." The man hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I just want to say, it's about time someone held these people accountable. You handled that with more grace than most of us would." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Grace, huh?" The man chuckled awkwardly. "Well, what I mean is, that woman had it coming. She thought she could get away with it because, well, you know how it is." Marcus studied the man for a moment, recognizing the clumsy attempt at solidarity. He was familiar with this type, the kind who saw injustice but only from a distance, safe from experiencing it themselves. Marcus nodded slowly but didn't engage further, letting the man's words hang in the air. "Anyway," the man added, sensing the conversation had reached its end, "I'm glad you stood up to her." Marcus simply returned to his tablet, his mind focused on larger battles ahead. There would always be a Caroline somewhere in the world, underestimating him or others like him. But he knew where his true power lay, in his ability to rise above it, to build despite the obstacles, and to demand the respect he deserved, not just as a billionaire, but as a man. As the plane flew over the clouds, Marcus settled in for the rest of the flight, knowing that in the quiet aftermath of this encounter, Caroline, and others like her, would never forget the lesson. Respect, like power, had to be earned, and today, she had learned it the hard way. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.